Hello, and welcome to the Dive-In. I'm your host, Kathleen. Today's co-host for this episode is my friend Tatiana. Welcome, Tati.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Today we are going to be diving into the movie Anyone But You. It's a Shakespeare-inspired rom-com starring Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell. As always, we are going to talk about the movie in depth, so if you don't want any spoilers, you have been warned. Yeah, so this movie is fairly new. It came out little over 6 months ago now, which is surprising. I feel like it was still fairly new, but are like newer because I think it is it still in theaters or did it just release on Netflix?
No, it just released on Netflix because I
Okay.
think it released in theaters in December. It was like
Yeah,
around the same
around Christmas
time
time.
as Dune? Question mark?
Dune
No.
was Dune was the beginning of this year.
Mm. Because I remember it released and I remember like its first week numbers were not good and then it like steadily like just started climbing.
Yeah, which was interesting. Did you end up seeing it originally in theaters?
No, actually, funny story. The first time I ever saw it was I was scrolling through Twitter. I was like laying in bed in the darkness at like 11 o'clock at night, doom scrolling through Twitter. And on my feed, some random like person was like, fuck it, the full Anyone But You. And they literally, it was a video in a tweet of the full movie of Anyone But You
Ah,
embedded, just like
oh
no
my
link to
gosh.
go anywhere else. It's just like in the tweet. And it was like 11:30 at night. And I had work the next day, but I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Full Anyone But You. And I just watching it on Twitter laying in the dark. And
I
then I've
can't believe
watched it since
I
it's come
can't
out on
believe
Netflix.
someone got away with posting that. I'm sure it didn't last long.
I know that's why when I saw it, I was like, I don't know
So
when this
funny.
movie's gonna come out on Netflix, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it to the theater. So we're just gonna right now or never.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, I ended up I waited till it streams. I thought about seeing it in theaters. I don't know. I was very questionable about whether I wanted to see it. The reviews were wishy-washy. Some people, a lot of influencers I saw loves it and they thought it was the restart of all rom-coms and blah blah blah, like bringing back those early 2000 vibes. And I was like, I don't believe it. I don't know. I didn't I
How do
didn't
you feel?
believe them.
How do you feel after watching it now? Because I have my thoughts on that sort of like idea of it.
I feel like I feel like there were a lot of hits, but there were a lot of misses too. It's like
Mhm.
they over exaggerated scenes that they didn't need to, that could have been funny on their own if they had been more realistic. And they took these over dramatic, uh, just over dramatic scenes and like just choices in general. In my mind, I'm comparing it to 10 Things I Hate About You. That is one of my
Mm,
all-time favorite movies, but that's also based off of a Shakespeare play. And it does it on a simpler scale. And the fact of like his Heath Ledger's big gesture is like singing at an auditorium at his school and just paying off the kids to lock the door so no one can stop them. But then in this one, unrealistically, he jumps off a cliff for a helicopter to come pick him up and then convinces the rescue helicopter to take him to the Sydney Opera House. There in no world would that happen. And I think that's where I'm kind of like, you you can't put yourself in those shoes. And I think that's where they missed the mark a little bit.
okay, because my thoughts are, so have you ever read Much Ado About Nothing?
I did read the summary, but I have not read that play.
Okay, so I've read the play once. I read it in school because English major, Shakespeare. And then I also had the delight of seeing it performed at school. My sister at the time was in her master's program for theater, and her team was like putting on Much Ado About Nothing. And it is like typically heralded as the true start to the rom-com, like the idea of the rom-com that we
Mm.
have in this modern time.
Yeah.
Much Ado About Nothing is generally considered that sort of like little seedling that was planted that like sprouted and became like the rom-coms that we know now, and
Yeah.
is also kind of generally considered to be one of his best comedies, like critically and like world, like in English classes like around the world. Of course, everybody has their favorites. Some
Yeah.
really love 12th Night. I'm a huge 12th Night fan, also a huge She's the Man fan. Some people, love As You Like It or A Midsummer Night's Dream. Like everybody has their favorites, but Much Ado About Nothing is kind of like within the zeitgeist of, at the very least, college English classes to be considered like his best comedy. And it part of it is because of how campy it is and sort
Mhm.
of how very over the top it is. And so when I was watching the movie, like knowing what I knew from like the marketing and stuff, I was sort of like, I was like, this isn't really selling me like on the rom-com. Like the marketing materials that Syndey and Glen did, and like I learned later through my research that it was very purposeful, like the type of marketing that they did and the type of like conversations they were trying to bring up around the movie. But I was really like, I don't really care if it's two hot people falling in love. Like, why would that make me like
Yeah.
want to watch this? And then it was like I think it was like December or January. I was scrolling through Glen Powell's Instagram because I was just in this headspace of like why like I really liked him in Set It Up, which I thought was a great rom-com. So I
Mhm.
was like, oh, Glenn, you're kind of like disappointing me. But then he was the only one, he was where I learned that it was a Much Ado About Nothing retelling. And I was like, why was this not in any of like the marketing materials? Like, as somebody who's like chronically online, specifically like on Twitter and TikTok and things, I'm like constantly seeing people being like, bring back 10 Things I Hate About You, bring back She's the Man,
Mhm.
bring back, those classic ones. So I was like, the fact that they didn't lead with this was like crazy
Yeah.
to me. And when I watched it and I saw just how silly and campy it was, it actually like made me really happy because I was like, oh, this very much so has like those that Much Ado like campy vibe that you get when you read the play or like when you watch the play. And like for me, Much Ado About Nothing, I think other than like 12th Night was like one of the few ones where I was like laughing out loud reading it
Yeah.
well as like watching it perform. So when I saw like the way that they condense characters and things like that, and obviously like Shakespeare plays have a gigantic cast of characters, you can't always get that in a movie. But I thought that the way that they at least consolidated them worked really well for the film. And I actually was like, I loved the gigantic romantic gesture, and I loved like the really silly, weird moments because I was like, oh, this feels like Much Ado and kind of like then also makes me feel a little bit like those like classic 80s and 90s
Mhm.
rom-coms. But that was me coming into it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring up that they didn't market it as a Shakespearean retelling because they put so much into it to be like, here's literally his words on a wall.
Yeah.
Here we are saying these lines that were clearly Shakespeare. Like even as someone who's never read that play, I knew that those were Shakespearean words the way that they said it. And they're like, oh, I just made that up. I just thought of it. And you're like, okay, so that's so interesting that there was no marketing saying that it was one, because it definitely would have drawn me in to go see it sooner, had I known sooner that it was based on that.
I know. I think they
Honestly,
were
I think you were the
yes.
person who told me that it was, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to read a book now before I record this podcast
Well, I think they were just relying so heavily. Like, I do think
on
that
the
Sydney and
actors.
Glenn had such great chemistry and like their chemistry was really palpable. And I actually really enjoyed like watching them like play
What's
off of each other.
so funny is I disagree. I
Oh,
mean, I
really?
think they had great chemistry, but they had very much a in my opinion, I saw them more as like almost like brother and sister in a way, and the way that they like
Mm.
hated each other and helped each other. And like I know that I just didn't feel the intensity. I think they acted well, but I just didn't, I don't know. For me, it just came off more brother and sister than romantic. I'm in love with you after one night of hanging out.
Well,
Um,
I think the reason I'm coming into it differently is that before I even saw the movie, I was really consuming like their interviews and stuff.
Mm.
And like the press conferences they were doing and stuff that, like reading like ASMR like sexy tweets and like all these different like stuff that they did through like BuzzFeed and Elle and like the type of stuff those magazines like have actors do when they're like promoting a project.
Yeah.
And also on TikTok there were like a lot of compilation videos and I felt like their chemistry off screen was really palpable whether they were playing into it or whether it
Yeah.
was actually natural. I think I think you could put Glen against anybody and he could make it work. Like I truly feel like he's a great rom-com lead.
Yes,
Having
I agree.
seen Set It Up, having seen Anyone But You, and I just watched his new one, Hitman, last night. Um, and he does so well. And he, I think, and we can talk about this later, but I think he really like of the pair brought the calm in the rom-com. Like in the whole thing, I thought his comedic timing and everything was like
Yeah.
really on point. But I know at the time when they were filming, and through my research I saw this, like I think Sydney Sweeney, it was an interview with the New York Times. I could be getting the outlet wrong, but they were basically leaning into like how like in the 90s and early 2000s, like that sort of like off-screen chemistry, like I think they were focusing more on promoting the movie through the like behind the scenes
Hmm.
photos and like things like that, and are they or are they not, and then like the scandal of like at the time they were both in relationships, and then like Glenn and his girlfriend broke up, but Sydney and her
Hmm.
husband, fiance, who's also an
Fiance.
executive producer
Hmm.
on Anyone But You, they stayed together. And so they were like really leaning into that in terms of promotional material, I think,
Yeah.
rather than going the Shakespearean route. And I understand
Yeah.
why, like in terms of like how people consume media these days and what goes viral and whatnot. But as somebody that grew up with all those classic rom-coms and Shakespeare retellings and grew up reading Shakespeare and watching Shakespeare, because I come from a big like family that's very much so into Shakespeare, I was like, this, I would have had such a different headspace going into this had I known originally from the marketing materials that this was much ado.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot about marketing right now. And I've talked about this on previous podcasts that it just feels like they're scrambling like for marketing of movies because scrambling to get people to get into movie theaters.
Mhm.
Um because that's a huge task right now is convincing people that it's worth $22 a person to sit with other people who could potentially like completely distract you or whatever and miss something of that movie, not being able to pause it and rewind
Mhm.
like ruining your experience. And so it's a difficult task right now, and I could see why they're like, well, everyone's so consumed with TikTok and knowing people personally. But it's kind of funny because now, ever since the Met Gala, people have been getting canceled. But
Oh
they're like,
yeah.
we don't care about your bougie life anymore. Like, let's spotlight people who are normal. And so it is, I think it's a right now it's kind of an uphill battle. It's an impossible task to like promote things like this. And as a, like I've also said on the podcast, like I wanted to do this podcast to bring people together so that I can have my friends watch the same movies that I'm watching. Because even that's hard to do is to get your own friends to want to have the same streaming platform or as you or go pay that money to go watch something together is so difficult. So I yeah, I also feel that movies have been overselling the the plot as well, and we know way too much going in.
The trailers. I don't know who's
It's
doing the trailers these days. And I mean,
yeah,
we've talked about this before where we're both people that are movie people and we're both
yeah,
people that love to like go to the movies. I know like you've
yeah.
like had your reasons for this changing, but like growing up, we were both people that collected movie ticket stubs. We love
Mhm.
to go by ourselves. We love to just sit in a dark theater.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people do. Um, but it's just like not as common anymore. Like I think I don't know if like people are like forgetting that they like it or maybe they just don't like it anymore, but I had
Yeah.
this sort of like I had my own mini renaissance with this um when I went and I saw Challengers last weekend, and it was the first time I had seen a movie in theaters in a little while, mostly because ticket prices are so expensive now and I'm no longer paying $5 a ticket like I used to. But it was like I could just sit in this like off to the side in this chair and just like be immersed in this world for 2.5 hours. At least that was Challengers, or for Anyone But You, and I was watching it last night for like just under 2 hours. And it like is kind of sad because I think if you just let yourself get lost in it and you
Yeah.
just kind of like recognize like, oh, this is gonna be silly and campy, like it's a rom-com, like whether
Yeah.
or not it's realistic, that's kind of like you can just allow yourself to be sort of in this like weird unrealistic world. and and but trying to get people, like you said, to like understand that or go with you with it, like go with you to it or go sit in a theater is so difficult. And it's interesting to see how studios and marketing companies are trying like all these different ways to get people in, because not every movie is going to be a Dune or a Challengers where you have
Yeah.
Zendaya and
Yeah.
like they're coming in, and it's like how do you make that work, and do you go straight to streaming? Like Glen's new one, Hitman, is a straight to Netflix movie. And I was
Okay.
actually at the beach yesterday, and when I was at the beach, there was a plane that kept flying over the beach with like one of those banner ads attached to
Yeah.
it, and it was an ad to hire Glen's character from Hitman to be your Hitman, and I was like, that's
That is
clever marketing. I
amazing.
was like, this is
I
clever
love
marketing.
that.
And I was like, see, that's fun.
That,
And
yeah, they just need little things like that to make you be like, oh, let me Google this real quick. Like, what is this?
yeah,
If you don't know, or if you do know, you're like, oh, that's hilarious. Like, this is
yeah.
great.
And kind of bringing it back to Anyone But You, even if like it wasn't my personal favorite
Yeah.
marketing technique, I do remember when the promo
Mm,
marketing for the movie came out. I
yeah.
remember the discourse online. I remember
I
how
remember
people were talking about it,
yeah,
talking about their chemistry, the like, whoa, what's going on?
the SNL
And
skit. Yeah.
yeah, the SNL skit. And as somebody who works in publicity for a living, and has been for a few years now, it is true what they say where there's no such thing as bad
Bad plus.
publicity,
Hmm.
because I mean, yeah, you can have bad publicity and yeah, like it might get you canceled or whatever, but at the end of the day, as long as people are talking about your project,
Hmm.
people are going to then be going out and searching for your project, and
Yep.
like barring any sort of like really horrible like stuff. There's a lot of horrible things going on in the world right now, and people that are supporting and or not supporting certain things. Like if you're just talking about like, oh my God, are they having an affair type of scandal? Like that kind of
Yeah.
conversation like really gets the boat moving. And then people are like, well, are they? Like, is this like what is it? Let's watch the movie. Like, what are they?
Yeah. And
And
it puts in like a subconscious like, okay, you watch the interviews because you saw the clickbait about whether they have this relationship, and they're like, but they're promoting anyone but you. And so you keep seeing anyone but you over and over and over again. You're getting the subliminal messaging while trying to get the tea, honestly. And that's very clever marketing
yeah,
alone. Like,
and I just have to give like applause to Syndey, because she is the master. Like in my research, what I saw, she was the mastermind behind a lot of it, and
she's the master.
really like
Sorry, go ahead. Go
no, no,
ahead.
no, you're totally fine. Like putting her business degree to good
Mhm.
use.
Mhm.
And I'm not like the biggest Euphoria. Like I never really like got super into Euphoria.
Yeah.
I think I saw season one, and I don't even know if I finished season one. And then I saw like the like iconic episodes, like, wait, is this play about us? Like that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
But I never actually was like really big into Euphoria. So my familiarity with Sydney Sweeney's acting isn't like super robust. It's like been a few episodes here and there. It's been Anyone But You. My roommate the other day was watching Madam Web, so I saw Sydney in
Mhm.
Madam Web. But really like researching and learning like the type of like work she put behind this, and
Mhm.
in terms of a businesswoman, in terms of a marketing exec, in terms of an executive producer, I was just like, you are so smart, which I think is also really cool, because I think Sydney is that type of, I think the industry can very easily like put her pigeonhole her as like, the blonde bombshell. And
Yeah.
so like really learning about like her behind the scenes thought process, like as a woman, just makes me really happy, because I'm like, fuck yeah, you
Yeah.
can be beautiful and
Yeah.
sexy and all these things, but also be really smart, and they can both go hand in hand. One can be bigger than the other,
Yeah.
and it just goes to show.
No, she is incredible as far like business wise, like despite what anyone has to say about her acting, she is a very, very clever person. I don't think it was great when she kind of, I mean, everyone dissed Madam Web. Let's just say that. But don't. Oh,
I didn't watch the full thing, but I did see some of Dakota Johnson's like iconic interviews on it.
yes, yeah. But I know that Sydney has also like made comments saying like, I needed to get in with Sony, and now because of Sony, I was able to do this and do that. And it's like, okay, that's great, but also like don't step on who helped you up. And I watched Madam Web. I actually kind of enjoyed it. I there's a lot of flaws. There's a lot of plot holes. I don't know where they were going with it, but there were parts of it that I genuinely enjoyed, and I don't think it's as bad as everyone made it out to be. Again, it's not canon to like anything at all. So you have to keep that in mind. I know it's a Marvel movie, but it's very much not canon to anything. But anyways, Sydney Sweeney, like I love what she's doing because she's taken what she has earned from her roles in Euphoria and Madam Web, and she has now been able to make her own production company and put out her own movies, which I think we need more of. And I
Mhm.
love that she's doing it. And it I think it's gonna create and open that the smaller movies that we need than these big budget ones that are the only things getting us in theaters. It's like, no, we want to see, we want the experience, we want to go to the theaters, but they haven't been able to give us anything. And I will say there's been COVID, there's been the strikes, and I think at this point everyone's just trying to put out as much as they can as quickly as they can, and maybe relying, I don't know exactly where they landed with AI and writing, but like they may be relying on that a little bit too much. I don't know, because some of the movies that are coming out are not great. They feel rushed. They feel like they had an idea that was great and then just were like good enough. Put it out
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
And I think kind of bouncing off of that, what goes to show just how smart Sydney is that
Mhm.
she also knows her audience is smart. Like so
Mhm.
many of these big studios just think their consumers and the watchers are stupid and like, oh, they're not going to notice that this was rushed, or they're not going to like recognize, they won't be able to tell the difference between an AI writing a script and like a real person writing a script. And
Mhm.
I think, I think Sydney Sweeney, like, and her team, they recognize, like, especially for rom-com fans and fanatics, like we will be able to tell, and we won't like stray away from like calling you out on if something is really really dumb. And I like respected her for that as
Yeah.
well, because I was like, thank you for like giving us a chance, you
Yeah.
know.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's great. Well,
What elements of the rom-com do you think it did really well?
I think I think that that how they met, the first scene, I've seen that scene maybe like 20 times before I even watched the movie because
The
it was
bathroom scene?
yes, like
I love
the
that
the
scene.
coffee shop part at least. It was just kind of I do feel like they kind of tried to oversell that Sydney Sweeney's character was like kind of a hot mess, quite literally. But she comes into a coffee shop. She needs to go to the bathroom. There's a huge line, and this guy just starts calling her his wife. Like, oh yeah, like what do you want? What did you want to drink? And blah blah blah. And so she orders something, and then gets the bathroom key, goes in the bathroom. This part I thought was weird, where he was just standing by the door, and she's like shouting at him while she's using the hand dryer. That I will say that's a little far fetched because for me, I don't know. I don't think for me, I would be cringing inside as that person. I'd be like, why is this man listening to me pee right now? Why is he so close to the door? I don't know him. He just helped me get the bathroom key. But maybe that's why I'm single because I don't trust anybody. Uh, but but it was comedic though. Like we see her strip off her pants and use the hand dryer, which is so realistic. It's something I've
Yeah.
done. I've done it at work where you're just trying to like dry your pants as quickly as possible so you can get back to where you need to be. And that now she has that urgency too because he's waiting for her and she's like, oh my gosh, wait, he's waiting for me and I have to hurry up. And so she is just doing everything she can to get her pants dry. Uh,
I think that's a great opening scene, and it
yes.
makes me laugh, and I think like it really, I think Sydney really got to show off her comedy chops with
Yeah.
that, because everything that I've known her to do has been pretty serious. So
Yeah,
it
because
was nice to kind of see her in more of like this like lighthearted, fun little role. And
yes.
then the sort of segue into like going to his house and the grilled cheese sandwich and like grilled cheese
Hmm.
night,
Yes.
I thought was really sweet and really cute. And I think what I find as a huge like rom-com lover is that even if it isn't realistic, like like the hopeless romantic in me is like I would love to like meet this like really nice hot tall guy
Yeah.
like in a coffee shop, and then like
Yeah.
we just hit it off so well and we
Yeah.
just keep chatting, and then the day goes on, and like
Yeah.
and sort of that regard. And then the grilled cheese scene I thought was really adorable, but also into how it kind of came back later down the line.
No, in terms of that scene, like I actually think that that's really adorable. I mean, every girl dreams of like meeting that guy and just spending all day with him, staying up all night talking. That is like the quintessential, like everyone wants that to happen as a hopeless romantic. And I think they did a wonderful job with that scene. Like we see them get like really intimate, even with like the words that they're using and how they are just the closeness that they build. And like we know that they don't sleep together, but they still spent the night together. And he told her like this intimate thing about his mom, which we learn how intimate like right after, because B slips out. She wakes up, slips out before Ben can wake up, and immediately okay. She's calling her sister, and she's like, "You need to go back." And I kind of understand like slipping out, like being like, I'm excited. She just got excited, and so she didn't think and just left. But I also probably would have like grabbed coffee so I could have casually come back and been like, I got us
Yeah,
coffee.
I was thinking the same thing because I've done this slip out before, because you kind of like when you wake up beforehand, you're kind of like, I don't you like don't know what to do, but you're excited, but you don't want to like overstay your welcome. And
Yeah.
I think like the immediate turnaround, well, like logically for the story, it makes the most sense because this entire basis of the story that leads into like the fake dating trope is the miscommunication trope and like the misunderstanding and mishearing,
Yeah.
because Glen's character Ben gets like all like guarded when his friend Pete's like, "Oh, you love her," and he's like, "No, I don't," and he's like just
Which,
trying to be like a macho bro about it.
yeah. Yeah, because I mean, as we learn later in the film, like his feelings are definitely hurt when he wakes up and she's not there. Because
Oh, you can see it on his face too when he
yeah,
wakes up and hears slash sees her slipping out, which I think also like props to Glenn for just those little micro moments that
yeah,
show the softie within the stereotypical douchebag exterior that Ben has.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, they were definitely selling that. Like, oh, I have comments about this, but I'm gonna get off topic. But like his little offhanded, like, oh yeah, I may have been on like this drug, or I may have been on that drug because Goldman Sachs and blah blah blah. Dude, I thought you were like this nice, wholesome, like sweet businessman, but you're kind of a party boy. Like
No,
you
what
literally
businessman
are.
is wholesome though? Let's be honest.
That's true. uh, but no, like, yeah, I think he did great just like being able to express to us that he was truly hurt. Like it wasn't like okay, cool, she left. But he looked hurt, and he tried to save face when the guy was telling him like, oh, you're in love, which after one afternoon, you don't know that for sure. And he was very defensive. I'm kind of like, is that a red flag? That he's already in love with. But it's also very Shakespearean because Shakespeare's very heavy with the, oh, I just saw you from across the room and now I must have you and leave this woman I've been in love with my whole life, and you are everything to me now. Let's run off and, you know, be together forever.
I know it, and if he as a character to me is just was just very interesting because he was based off of Don Pedro from
Okay.
Much Ado, but Don like Don Pedro is like one of like the funnier characters in Much Ado, but a lot of what he does, if I'm remembering correctly from the play, is like he's there to woo Hero for Claudio, like and to help Claudio get Hero. But we kind of
Mm.
already like that's already done. Like Hallie and Claudia, they're already engaged, they're already together. So like
Yeah.
it it like the way that they utilize him was just like interesting because also in the play he's Don Pedro, so he and Don John are like, they're higher up in nobility and ranking or whatever, they're Dons, but Don Pedro is friends with Benedict and Claudio, or in uh Much Ado, and about and oh my god, anyone but you, Claudia and Ben, as we know. And it's like Don Pedro in the play has like the wit, he has a sense of humor, but he also has the power. And I kind of just felt like he became another sort of just like puck campy character
He was
for the
kind of a comic relief, which was
him and
pretty
the dad.
much
And the
everyone. Like all the parents were comic reliefs. He was a comic relief. There, I thought it was earlier you were saying that they condensed the cast, but I feel like this was still a lot of people uh involved with this story. Like it makes sense for a wedding to have these people, but how involved every single one of them was a lot.
Well, it's because in Much Ado, there's the Benedict and Beatrice, or Ben and B story, but then there's also the like kind of like weird thing that's going on between Hero and Claudio, where like you're like, is Claudio a bad guy? Is he abusing Hero? We don't know. And there's like that whole thing going around. And then you have Dogberry, who's the like police figure, and he's kind of like the puck. He's like really like his whole shtick in Much Ado, which we see in the stepdad, Claudia's stepdad, is that in the play, Dogberry Clerk can only like he always says the wrong thing. Like he means well, but he's just like always saying the wrong thing. And
Yeah.
they like did that through the stepdad as well. Which I thought was funny, but it was interesting that they just like paired Dogberry and Don and Pete together, because I don't remember fully in the play if Dogberry and Don Pedro like work together in any regard.
Yeah.
But it was also like obvious that rather than, because Shakespeare's comedies focus on so many different like hands, right? On so many different characters. You look
Yeah.
at Twelfth Night, with Duke and Olivia and Sebastian and I know there's only three people, but everybody else that's involved. And then in Midsummer, you have Titania and you have Puck and you have Demetrius and you have Helena and you have Hermia, and like everybody has their own thing, and then like how they get entangled together. And that's so hard to do in a hour and a half movie. So like I understand that they were like condensing it down to just focus on Ben and B, and it's like, okay, everybody else will like be the ones like puppeteering them. But it
Yeah.
was also just sort of like Pete as a character, I was kind of like, some of the time I was like, I know you're here for comic relief, but I'm also kind of like, why are you here? Not to
Yeah.
like downgrade the character. And I know he's there to be like Ben's sounding board, and he's there to like tell Ben like it's okay if you love her, it's like okay to be in touch with your feelings and things like that. But it just like sometimes just felt like he was just there to sort of.
Yeah, because I mean, he could have just been friends with Claudia, and they could have had that relationship where she was his sounding board. Like they didn't.
Well, they're brother and sister in the
Yeah,
movie,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I'm just kind of like, we could have just left Pete out. Ben's the best woman or whatever, maid of honor to Claudia on that side, because they were friends, and it would have made so much sense if like they were just each other's sounding board, and she was the one being like, wait, if you love her, go for it. Uh, but yeah, no, I agree. I thought it was like there were like just silly parts, and then there were other times where he was the sound of reason against the with his stepdad, and uh like the airport scene was just kind of like, why? Like he has those balloons, hands it to them, takes it back and gives it back to that family. It was I did laugh. I was like, oh, okay, I don't know what's happening. But it was
I mean,
kind of confusing.
he was really funny at parts. Like I love the koala scene where
Mm,
they're all like looking at the koala, and then in the
yes.
background you see Glen and Syndey. like
Which
freaking out. They had a lot of those moments of like in the foreground, like
yeah,
one thing was happening and then in the background there
yes,
was something
yes,
else, which I
yes.
appreciated and
I
thought was
like that a
funny.
lot. Yeah. I definitely thought that scene was funny. I liked how they just collectively just went towards the koala and they just had complete wasted efforts of I don't know who puts their hands that far down someone's pants. I don't know what was happening there. Even for pretend, it was very
It
yeah, that's one of those parts where I'm like, if someone were to do this, like in real life, like you don't I mean, like the
but I think
circling of the yeah, I don't know.
but I think what that lends itself to in some of those like overdone moments
Yeah.
is like I think back to the theater and I think back to Shakespeare on stage
Mm,
and I think back to those like overdone gestures and what lends itself to the comedy.
yeah.
And there's like a common knowledge that like in movies, like what matters more are those minuscule, more intimate like gestures and changes. And then in the theater, you're like overacting and your makeup's really
Yeah.
like blown out because you're not just performing to the front row, you're performing to everybody at the back of the house and things like that. So it's much more grand. But I kind of like appreciated that they brought that sort of mentality into the movie because
Yeah.
I think Shakespeare comedies, like 10 Things I Hate About You, She's the Man, like they're all silly, they're all campy, they're all kind of like overdone. Like, why are we at a soccer game and everybody's showing off their genitals? Like, like it's like,
Yeah.
is that realistic? Like, there are other ways to prove that Amanda Bynes is a woman and the actor that plays Sebastian is a man, but it just like it's part of the like I think
Yeah.
hilarity and sort of like craziness of
I just wish they had done something that was more it's one of those things where you kind of like an improv where you want one person to be the crazy. You can't
mm,
have two crazy in
you
it.
need the straight man.
Yeah, and so like for example, with the scene where they're both putting their hands down each other's pants, it would have made more sense for
I'm
like
sorry. I've my roommate's dog is barking.
that's okay. It's okay. Um, Remy,
She hears people on the roof and so she's barking. It's
gotcha.
okay, Rem. Little Sheba.
But for example, like when Glen Powell's like putting his hand like all the way down her pants and it's so tight and so uncomfortable, like that would have been a part where like she could have said, what like what are you searching for? Why are you going down that far? Or something like something to those lines. So I'm not a writer, so someone else could say something better. But that would have been like a good timing to like let him do his thing, but then her like look at him and be like, what is wrong with you? Have you never flirted with a girl before? Like, have you never felt up like a girl's ass before? This is not how you do it.
That's
Uh
fair.
yeah. Like I think all of their intentions were great. I just feel like there were like just near misses. It's like they were just off. Like it counted, but it just wasn't still quite a bullseye.
Yeah.
Trying
Yeah, there were moments where it was like, is this the best rom-com writing? No. But I do think that like as a net whole, it all worked. I
yeah.
also think that the lack of like maybe like the best writing in there, like I mean, I thought he was funny with being like, is this like a vacuum seal? How the hell did you get in here? Like that was funny.
Yeah. That was great.
Um, but I also like wonder if that's just up to like, is Glenn better like on the
Mm,
improv? Like Glenn has been in comedies and romantic comedies like a ton. If you
yeah.
look at his, CV, and is probably more used to improving in that sort of way or like coming up with those one-liners. And like this was what Sydney Sweeney's like first like major comedy and or rom-com. So
Yeah.
maybe she doesn't quite have like those skills. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they filmed the hand down the pants scene,
Mhm.
multiple takes
Yeah.
and Glenn's just improving off of like whatever and then like they picked the best one because like there's also like in that same scene when they find the spider and he
Yes.
takes off all his clothes and gets completely naked. Glenn just throws himself into it. You can see his veins bulging, his face is so red. And then
Hmm.
what I thought was even funnier was that in the background you can see Sydney breaking character and just bursting out laughing and having to turn around. And then like and but I'm somebody that loves that. Like I
Yeah.
love watching like comedies and like seeing when an actor breaks. Like I love finding it in Friends.
Oh,
I love it in
yeah.
movies. I love it on SNL. Like I
Yeah.
know some people
It's
don't
like
think
a
Jimmy
treasure
Fallon's
hunt.
yeah. Like I know some people don't think Jimmy Fallon's like that funny, but I love
Yeah.
watching his old SNL skits and like when he breaks because it makes it funnier in
Yeah.
a way for me. I know not maybe everybody thinks that, but I
Yeah.
do.
I don't, it's like kind of like appreciating the comedy through someone else in a way. Like you're like,
Yeah.
wait, it's like when you give someone a gift and you see the joy in their face. It's the same thing with watching someone break character because the scene is just something that they just think is hilarious. It's one of those moments. You're kind of
Yeah.
like, this is so cute. Like this person clearly thought this was hilarious, and I think it's funny too. And then you see them breaking, you're like, oh yeah, we're on the same
We're
level.
all on the same page.
Yeah.
And it just made it like I just really appreciated it in comedies because I don't think I could do this. Just when the actor kind of like throws themselves into it so much that you're making other people like laugh
Mhm.
on and like because you know like we know how movies are made and we know how many like takes a scene takes basically. So it make it like
Yeah.
it kind of makes me realize like no this probably was so funny to film because they probably filmed this scene like 20, 30 times and I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if Sydney's like okay I'm not gonna laugh this time I'm not gonna break but she just
When I get
couldn't
through
do it
it.
and then she does. I saw in like an interview she did with Jimmy Fallon that when they were also filming that scene, she was bit by the spider she holds,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
that
I
in
saw
one
that.
of the clips, like she's screaming bloody murder, and it was Glenn who was the one that like realized like, oh no, this isn't
Yeah.
acting screaming. This is like
This is real
Sydney
screaming.
Sintay. Yeah,
Which, okay, going back to marketing, this was a great marketing tool. Like showing us a small snippet, like not
yeah,
giving us any of the story and being like, this happened. It gave us something that was personal, something that happened on set behind the scenes, and but still gave us enough of the movie that you're like, now I want to see that scene. I gotta watch the movie to see the scene now, to
yeah,
see the like spot that part. That is great marketing right there without giving a story away, without being like, look into their lives and blah blah blah, or like,
yeah.
is she cheating on her fiance? Like, I thought that was a great marketing tool right there.
I
It
agree.
sucks that she got bit by a spider for it to happen, but it is funny. I mean, she was the way that she talks about it is so funny too, because she was probably like, wow, she's going really serious with this like rom-com
Yeah.
screen.
And
Um,
then it's like, no, like I
but
actually was bit by this
the
spider.
spider.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, what? So after that scene, that's kind of I'm trying to remember what happens next. Oh wait, no. I want to go back to the airplane scene, which this was like fun. This is one of those moments where I thought was like really funny, but there were just nuances that bothered me so much.
Okay,
Like
let's hear it.
okay, so for for those of those for those of those for those of you listening, in the airplane scene, Glen Powell's all the way up in first class, and Sydney Sweeney's in coach, and she has to go to the bathroom. Which also twice in a movie, that's amazing. People don't go to the bathrooms in movies.
I know, right?
Right? But she uh has to go to the bathroom, and the one back in coach is occupied, so she goes up to first class where Glenn is sleeping, and immediately someone takes that. And so she sees that he has a cookie, and he had offered it to her before. So she just kind of like reaches over and tries to take it from him, and her jacket gets stuck, and she has to like very awkwardly try to unstick her jacket. And
And she's like
I
on him. She's like
see it
on top of him.
on top of him. One lady like takes off her eye mask at one point, looks over and is like, "Nope, that is not my problem." Puts it back down.
She's like, I'm not even gonna deign this with a
But
response.
yeah, no, not at all. But I don't know. I thought it was I thought it was a very funny scene. I was just bothered by the fact that nobody was watching a movie. Everybody was asleep on the plane except for Sydney Sweeney, and that he somehow did not wake up or feel her presence.
Well,
How
didn't he
hard of a
say
sleep do you have to
that
be in?
didn't he say that because he's so afraid of flying that he like takes something to knock him out, plays the Serenity song, Like,
I
doesn't he explain that to her?
I
I'm pretty
remember the Serenity song. I don't remember if he said he took something though.
like, I thought he said he takes, like, a sleeping pill because he just hates
Maybe he
flying
did.
so
Maybe
much, and that was,
yeah.
like, the sort of explanation. But
Yeah.
going to the Serenity song, I wanna talk about that for a moment because, as we know, the movie was directed by Will Gluck, who also is known for directing, writing, and producing Easy A,
Mhm.
which is another iconic rom-com based off of not a Shakespeare play, but based off of Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter,
Mhm.
starring Emma Stone before she like when she was still like of super bad fame and not multi-Oscar winning
Yeah.
Emma Stone. Um, but I kind of loved, I really like, I think what was one of the many things that made this feel like a classic rom-com for me and made me understand the oh yeah, we're back mentality was how Natasha Bedingfield's Unwritten, like how it comes throughout the movie at multiple times, and
Yeah.
then they have like the credit scene where everybody is singing
Yes.
it in all the different
Scene.
scenes. Like it's not just like one big party where they're singing it through. Like it's clear that you could tell that like after they filmed the airplane scene, they were like, okay, everybody, we're gonna film a clip of uh Unwritten, and then like when we're at the wedding or like when we're on the boat or things like that. And I also thought, I don't know if it was Sydney's idea. I don't know if
Yes.
it was Will's idea, but I just love that it was like kind of a callback to Easy A and the Pocket Full of Sunshine like moment, and how that song
Yeah.
really like got its legs and got a lift from the Easy A movie because of
Yeah.
like it
Which
doing that.
yeah, which that had a revival on TikTok too. The little scene where she's just
Yeah.
opening the
I
letter.
gotta, I
I
gotta,
gotta,
I
I
gotta.
gotta, I got a pocket full. Yeah.
So iconic. And I just, and
Yeah.
it's like that kind of stuff, like it's cheesy, but that's the to me that's kind of like the whole point of a rom-com. Like
Yeah. It is
I'm
supposed to
in
be
the
cheesy.
rom-com for the cheese. And like there are
Yeah.
some that aren't super cheesy, like ones that I really love, like About Time. Like I think that's more like emotional and sweet than cheesy. But like even classics like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days
Oh,
is cheesy.
such a
Failure to
good.
Launch is cheesy. But that's kind of what makes a rom-com, like rom-coms that take themselves too seriously to me fail.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Anyone But You worked for me, because I don't think it took itself too seriously.
Agreed. Yeah. I agree with you. I do think that they didn't take themselves too seriously. For me, I think it was just some of the I mean, we can keep going, but I just feel like there were like little changes they could have made and gone through less effort and had the same amount of comedy and I don't know. It's just when I think of things like 10 Things I Hate About You and oh gosh, you referenced it several times. She's the Man, like those movies I could still see, even though it's not realistic for a woman to dress. I mean, I could see it happening. A woman dressing up as her twin brother going into this to play soccer. It in our minds we're like, oh, that's not realistic. She wouldn't be able to get away with it. But you're kind of like, but she maybe she could have. Like maybe she did. Maybe someone has done that. I mean,
I could talk
people.
about that movie ad nauseum. I can quote that movie. Like I watched it with my roommate Gloria for the first time a while ago,
Yeah.
and I had to like start just like munching on snacks because I just kept reciting the movie because I've seen it so many times.
Oh,
And
I know every word to 10 Things I Hate About You. Me and my best friend did that. We sat down to watch it, and her husband joined us, and we did line by line, and he was like, "I can't stand this," and just
yeah, that was me with She's the Man. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love 10 Things I Hate About You. Katarina, did you make anyone cry today? No, but it's only 4:30, so who knows, who knows how the day goes. 10 Things I Hate About You is also an interesting adaptation. I mean, if we're going to
Yeah,
stay within the Shakespeare adaptation world,
yeah,
because in the play, Patrick is not named Patrick. I just can't remember what the Shakespeare character is called,
yeah.
but he's like gross. He's an asshole. He spends the
Mm,
entire play gaslighting Katerina.
mm,
And 10 Things I Hate About You, in my opinion, kind of made the Taming of the Shrew better because they like saw all the like gross, like misogynistic, like toxic and somewhat abusive stuff that Patrick's character in the play kind of does to Katerina throughout the play,
Hmm.
and just made it not not that, and
Yeah.
just made Patrick, I think, more of a likable love interest than he is in The Taming of the Shrew. I also, though, I'm gonna look this up, if The Taming of the Shrew is considered a comedy or it is a comedy. Okay, it's considered a comedy. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Then we can have a whole different podcast if we can group 10 things and she's the man and just kind of continue the Shakespeare
Yeah, honestly.
conversation. Not get too in there. But I thought the same of, well, what's good about Much Ado About Nothing is that Benedict and Beatrice are kind of considered some of Shakespeare's most lovable characters
Yeah.
for their heart, for their humor, for their wit. I mean, the entire play is about witticisms and the duels being with wit rather than with swords, and sort of like them falling for each other because of it, and then the whole idea of like the
Mhm.
line between love and hate is like super thin. And I thought that they did a good job. I thought that there were like a couple of duds in my opinion, but for the most part I thought they did a good job of kind of bringing out those like witty sides to Beatrice and Benedict, because that's kind of what I was nervous about, because I was like, if they can't get the wit
Yeah.
down and if they can't have like some good verbal spars, then I was like, then this is kind of gonna just flop for me.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think they really had good banter, like, and that like back and forth. That's also it's like the enemies to lover. Like you want them to have that push and pull where they're like you see that they're head to head, but because of it, you're kind of like, oh, but they're like on the same level.
Yeah.
So they should, be together. And I actually appreciated that in this movie, everyone saw that they should be together except for them,
Hmm.
because a lot of times you'll have someone who's like, no, he's a terrible guy. He treated you terribly. Why would you want to be with him? Like those kind of things. So it was nice for everyone else to recognize it before them. So it wasn't just like an outright enemy, this guy's terrible, and then oh no, it turns out he actually has a heart of gold. It's like, no, we knew they were going to be together the entire time, but how was it going to happen?
Yeah, and I also
Yeah.
appreciated that they sort of, it was after Glen slash Ben teaches Sydney slash B's dad how to dive, which, let's just throw that out there. Dermot Mulroney of rom-com fame, My Best Friend's Wedding, like, come
Mhm.
on. And I'm pretty sure Rachel Griffiths, who is his wife in Anyone But You,
Yeah.
was also in My Best Friend's Wedding. So we have some like top tier rom-com royalty in this movie.
Yeah.
Um,
We-
but kind of like, it was like right after he helps him learn how to dive, where they're
Mhm.
talking, and like he finds out like, oh, you also you overheard all of that, and like he owns
Mhm.
up to it and he apologizes. Well, the
Yeah.
first time I saw the movie, I was surprised at how early that came about, because
I
I thought it was gonna be the like big end scene of like,
Yeah.
no, you misunderstood, and like this, like about my mom and like all this other stuff. But the fact that they
Yeah.
had that early on, which then gave us like more understanding into how the harbor scene like really sort of cemented their care for one another. And then we have the second hookup scene where then Ben leaves because he gets scared. Like, I
Because of what
thought
she
was,
said. Yeah.
yeah, that to me I liked, because it felt more realistic to have
Mhm.
that sort of be the true sort of, the word that came to mind was junction, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But the true sort of like head to head, because like he left because he was scared of the words that she said, and then
Yeah.
she was really hurt because now they actually had sex, and then he left and she's like, that kind of feels shitty, rather than it just being like, they're both miscommunication tropes, but I feel like the second one was a little bit stronger of a
Yeah.
miscommunication trope than the first one. And but the fact that like that apology came as early as it did in the movie, like I was like
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised by it.
Yeah. And I also was very shocked about that first apology, because I I literally had to pause the movie and be like, how far in are we? Like, because usually that'll happen like you get the apology, they make up, and then almost immediately is when that second action happens that causes the next conflict. That'll happen, and then they make up. Like it's usually like boom, boom, and not like
Yeah.
here we're gonna put this in the middle, and then we'll put that where it usually goes. So they had like a nice little peaceful middle.
Mhm.
But Ben, of course, said he was like, "Oh, I'm still interested in his ex." Um, Let me see if I
I also
remember.
just want to say, and I know that a lot of people might not agree with me
Yeah,
about this, but I think the blue dress she wears on the harbor boat,
yeah.
um, that to me did for me what Kate Hudson's yellow dress and 10 things, not 10 things,
Mm,
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days did for me. That,
yeah,
like, the costume department fucking killed it
yeah,
with some of Sydney's looks. But that blue dress, the material, the way it hugged her body, the like
yeah.
kind of
Oh,
Cinderella
when
effect of it.
I was looking at pictures of them when they were on the buoy, and it like the way it fit her on the buoy, and when it was soaking wet, I was like, that is a good dress. Like,
I was just like,
yeah,
this is like a true, like, I completely understand why Glen is like goo goo gaga over it, because
yeah,
I'm goo goo gaga over it as well. I'm
yeah,
just like, wow. And I think like it did its job well, kind of similar to how Kate Hudson's
yeah,
yellow dress. It doesn't, I don't know if it'll have as long lasting of like an effect in pop cultural history. Um, as the yellow dress, mostly because I haven't really seen anybody talk about the blue dress.
mhm,
But I truly think that it's an underrated choice in the
yeah.
movie. Like I truly think it was such a strong choice and it did its job and more so
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I agree. Oh no, what was I gonna say? Oh, so like back to like Ben like ended up putting his foot in his mouth essentially. Well, not putting his foot in his mouth, but he expressed that like, hey, he's still interested in his ex-girlfriend who was there, which was part of the reason why they went along with like they found out everyone's trying to get them together, or so
Yeah,
they
because they're trying to get Ben with his ex, but trying to get her parents and her ex off her back.
yeah, because her ex is there as well because of her parents, which so much so much to unpack there. For your parents to bring your ex-fiance to your sister's wedding and then tell him that he knows that you're, or tell him that you're okay with it, which is insane, to go
Meddling parents,
across
man.
the world for a girl without talking to her. Like, yeah, yeah. Anyways, that was a little on the crazy. I mean, maybe he thought he was being like a grand romantic gesture, which is cute. But yeah, so she's like trying to avoid him. They find out everyone's trying to get them together. Their friends are trying to get them together. Her parents are trying to get her with Jonathan. And then Ben actually wants to get back together with his ex, who's with another guy. So they both agree, like, okay, let's just like I pretend like B's like, I'll pretend to be in a relationship with you to get my parents off my back, and you pretend to be in a relationship with me to get your ex, and which I can't remember. Is it Miranda?
Margaret,
Margaret. To get Margaret
like jealous and into
jealous.
you.
Yeah, yeah. So that's happening as like a subplot, which is why even after they make up, they don't immediately get together. And it's kind of heartbreaking, especially when Ben says it to B, because you can read it on her face. Like she was just like, "Oh, okay." Like I thought you could just feel it, like because she thought that they were kind of on the same page, and she was kind of like, "Oh, we're not on the same page. Like you're still into her, and it doesn't matter what did or did not happen, or what miscommunication happened, because you are still hung up on somebody else."
Yeah.
And he was like, let's not be too relationship-y, like let's back off so it still seems like we're open, which is so confusing. uh I mean, I get it, like you're like, I want to seem taken but not too taken enough that she wants me and that she
Yeah.
can still take me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kinda like it's like just to make them seem desirable.
Hmm.
Like, if because if another girl's desiring me, then she'll want to desire me.
Yes, which is sad, but sometimes very true that happened.
Yeah.
Which his ex's Margaret,
Mhm.
her boy toy was dumb as rocks. And
Oh, the Aussie?
yeah, just a hot guy there.
That was so funny. Like they really they really leaned into the Aussie-ness of it all.
Yeah. Um, okay. Sorry, I'm
Though
like
I
losing
didn't
track.
think that one thing that I couldn't believe, like Glen Powell to me is way too hot to have like it doesn't just it's not realistic to me that he would have been threatened by him.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah. I don't know if he was like necessarily threatened by him though. He just seemed more annoyed that he
That's
was
fair.
there. Um, but yeah, no, he is for finance bro, finance bros aren't threatened by anybody.
That's
Their
true.
egos are so big. So
That's true. And I did like the running joke about how he's like fit but can't do cardio.
oh my gosh. Oh my God, your hot girl fit.
Your hot girl fit was so funny to me. I thought that was so funny, especially because we got that like quick little like moment of him on the beach doing those like workout moves that were just supposed to like make him look hot. And then
Yeah.
a couple of minutes later, he's like doggy paddling in the water and can't swim.
And she literally has to like lifeguard him to the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I feel like we're kind of like jumping all over the place, but the charades night was so funny. I actually really enjoyed that scene. Um, I I think it was crap. I can't remember what happens in that scene though. I know that like the firework goes off and they like blow up the
Yeah,
display.
but when they're doing the like trying to guess like the songs or whatever, and then
Yeah.
she's like, your ego, and they're
Yes.
like making it
That's what it
about
was.
them, and they're with the stepdad, and he's just so confused, and then Ben slash Glenn is like Roger, what is this? And he's like a spat, a fight, and he's like, no, not that, the firework. I think that was just like another. I think that was just like another good opportunity for
Yeah.
them to reveal like the comedic nature of the film, but also give a chance to show off Ben and B's wits.
Yeah.
Again, like kind of leaning back into like what we were talking about earlier. Like first it was like him being smart enough. I don't really know if we'll classify this as what, but him being smart enough to help her out for the bathroom, and then
Mhm.
Syndey being smart enough to like, okay, air dryer, let's go with the pants.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to the nightclub scene where they're going like, where do you still live? 28 fuckboy lane. And he's like, oh, you did remember. And she's like, you'll always be my rock bottom. Like that
Yeah.
scene, the uh the scene on the plane where he first comes back to see her
Mhm.
and she's like, I'm all good on creatine and small dick insecurity, which just the staccato nature of those two of that like phrase and the syntax of that phrase just sounds so good to my ears. Creatine and small dick insecurity. I don't know what it is. And then now like the charade scene, all of those scenes happen in like the first half of the movie, the first like 40 minutes of the movie. And I think and there was enough in between each scene that they didn't come super back to back, but they came close enough to the previous one that the structure of it, I think, did a really good job of setting up the wit and banter and sort of like mind play between the two leads.
Yeah.
That we got further into the film and kind of leaned more into the romantic side and the
Yeah.
emotion side, that they could really like give into it there and not
Yeah.
feel the need to like still be witty and still like prove like, oh, like we're as witty as Shakespeare, like whereas like that. And I think also did a good job of like setting the basis for how they both kind of just go into each interaction with that sort of antagonistic aggressive nature. I mean, you see it when they're coming out of the bedrooms um to like go to the charades, because they
Yeah.
like both come out and then they're walking down the hall, and they do look like they're ready to rip each other's clothes off in that moment as well. But again, you have that push and pull of like hate and love. But I think all of that eventually then leads up to the blue dress harbor scene,
Yeah.
And when you get them on the buoy after
Yes.
Ben jumps in after her, like, okay, it's cringy and it's cheesy that they're Titanicking, but then she
Yeah.
falls and he jumps in after her, and it's like, no, that's like that's incredibly romantic, especially for somebody who we've already had set up can't swim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like the dichotomy of the antagonism and wit, but then with the respect and care and romance
Mhm.
that the harbor scene kind of gives is like a good sort of like middle ground. Um, and they kind of open up to each other more. Like that's where B opens up about why she feels like things weren't good with her ex because they never
Mhm.
fought. It was just comfortable, which is a stark contrast to how her and Ben, even from before the miscommunication happened, they were kind of fiery. They were bouncing off one
Yeah.
another. There was more of that spark, more of that ignition, more of that passion. And then and then again with Ben, like when they're on the buoy, like kind of how like they're both kind of in this state of mind of like, well, when I met you, this is where I was, and like it
Yeah.
scared me. And
Yeah.
and it was like I didn't know what to do with that. And that's where
Yeah.
she kind of opens up, like after he's already apologized for like the things that he said, this is like her chance to be like, I freaked out and then I was scared. And then he
Yeah.
was like, I get it because I was hurt when you left. And like this sort of just like that heart to heart moment, I think really then like it had the ability to really soar because of the contrast that was built up to it in that point in time.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like they are kind of opening up to them to each other there, especially B, 'cause she even mentions to him that she like dropped out of school officially and she hasn't told anyone. And he's kind of like, "Oh, you finally did it. Like you were talking about this, X amount of time ago, and like you finally like realize like, no, this is my life." And I think for him that was also him being able to see like, okay, she's getting herself together. She's doing what she wants and what makes her happy, and she's not just doing things to go through the motions. She's taking control of her life. So I feel like it makes it allows him to see her and less of a, oh, she's just a mess who doesn't know what she wants, because he does say that like literally later, like to Pete. um
And he calls her a disaster to her face too.
Yeah, yeah, because he literally is like, you don't know what you want. Um, and I kind of, because of that, I do kind of wish that she had been the one going to him, only because they had built up all of this, like, oh, she's a mess, she doesn't know what she wants, she's a disaster, blah blah
Mhm.
blah. And I think it would have been cute because of those characteristics and because of that lead up for her to go to him and be like, I know what I want. Like this
Yeah.
is this is what I want. But we did have him do his grand gesture and go to her. Um, so I don't know what I was
Which
gonna say. Sorry.
kind of almost would argue that to me the true grand gesture, the true big moment for me was the buoy scene and not so much the opera scene. Like I know on the buoy they set up like we'll go to the opera house, like it's a date,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I think that the buoy scene was be coming to Ben with the vulnerability in the opening up about how she felt and where she was at in life.
Yeah.
And I think like it's difficult to see that as the big gesture because when you think of the big romantic gesture, you do think of the helicopter and running
Yeah.
and on the steps, but in its own way, I kind of liked that it was more intimate, it was more gentle, it was more vulnerable, and then you get the humor of when they're being lifted out and she starts singing like Unwritten to him and he's like, how do you know my Serenity song? But like I don't think every like proclamation of love needs to be like
No,
a grand sweeping moment. And I kind of liked that they even though like, Ben gives his big speech to her like in front
mhm.
of the opera house and she's like, so are you gonna kiss me now or what? Again, a callback to the, so are you gonna ask me on a date or what? But I think in B's own way, the buoy scene was kind of her like her own proclamation.
The only reason why I would argue against this be only because it is later in the scenes that we see um Was it after? Okay, well, I know for a fact that like afterwards he does say after they sleep together and he walks out that time because she said that like, oh, I'm such a mess. And when him and Pete are running errands for the wedding on the day of the wedding, he
I
tells
just
Pete
also
like,
want to call out when they're running errands, the bakery's name is called Dogberries, and I was like, that makes me smile. It was like another little Easter egg. Anyway, sorry,
no,
continue.
you're good. But when he's talking to Pete, he says like she doesn't know what she wants. She has absolutely no idea where she's going with her life, and that's when he lets it slip like that. Oh, she like just dropped out of school. So it was further
Fair.
along after she already made the that proclamation. And at that point, they still kind of like hated each other. So it was
Yeah.
she hadn't come to that realization of like, oh, I actually like really like you. Like they hooked up and during that night, like I feel like it was after that proclamation is when they kind of like fell back into
Mhm.
that love. And then we see when did her and Jonathan play croquet? I think it was. Or
Chess?
no, they were outdoors. Her and
Yeah, they
Jonathan.
were yeah, they were playing the big chess.
Oh, it was big chess. Okay. I just knew it was an outside
That
lawn
was
game.
that
But that
was
was
I
earlier, wasn't it?
that was around the same time of I think that was after when Ben teaches her dad how to swim and like he
That's right.
apologizes. And the only reason I remember that is because of the outfit that she's wearing,
Yeah.
because this movie was also basically an entire campaign to promote her collaboration with Frankie's Bikinis, which was also very clever and
Yes.
smart. And all of her bikinis were beautiful. Like I wanted them all anyway, so props for that. But no, yeah, it was after that and when they're playing chess and then because he went inside to change and then
Yeah.
Jonathan's like, "Hey, can we chat?" And then he sees them from like the bedroom,
Yeah.
yeah, looking down and they're playing chess.
Yeah. It was funny though, after when the parents come back and they're like, what are these handprints? And they're like trying to clean them off.
Yeah, they also another Jonathan from Never Have I Ever, another great sort of like comedy rom-com.
Yes. Oh my gosh, he's great. I wish they had him a little bit more in this movie because I think he's hilarious. He does such a great job in Never Have I Ever.
Oh my God, he's so funny in Never Have I Ever. He
Right.
was a little underututed, but that's
Yeah.
okay. I think
Yeah. He
he
did a
still
great
did a good
job.
job.
So like pretty much like on the wedding day, they ended up having like a like big fight in the beginning of the day because like he had indirectly told B's parents that she wasn't going to law school because he told Pete because he was just like
Yeah.
expressing himself. He was expressing his feelings. He was trying to be like, this is how I am. This is what happened. Blah, blah, blah. Like, this is why I
Hmm.
think this. And Pete, as we learned, apparently cannot keep his mouth shut and told her parents, and they were upset. It was
Then
yeah.
the dog Clonopin
Oh my
goes to the fox and ruins the
gosh.
cake. That was
Yes.
kind of
That shouldn't have been B's fault.
I don't it wasn't B's fault. I also don't think like I mean, I remember that there's like two scenes like earlier in the movie where they set it up that they're training the dog to like go after the fox and like
Yeah, yeah,
attack it and things like that. But I don't know. It kind of just felt like an easy way out. But I mean, but
yeah,
it lent itself enough to where Hallie and Claudia could have that fake argument for Ben to overhear.
yeah. I agree. I like they needed them to screw something up the morning of. To be like, here they are fighting again. They're going to ruin our wedding. Which
Yeah.
honestly, the cake being destroyed the day of the wedding and the bride's hair getting caught on fire, I would have been like, no, this is the bad omen.
Oh my God, Hallie's hair getting caught on fire.
It was
I
so
was
cute
la
after though,
Yeah, it
but
was. And I was laughing. I was laughing a bit too because I was like, oh, they went there.
yeah.
Like I thought it was just gonna like explode the flowers, but then it
Yeah.
didn't
But
even cut
no,
her hair.
it got her hair, which I mean, I would have been so pissed, but she just was so chill. Uh,
So chill.
so that's why I kind of like that they did it that way because then when they did have their fight, it made a little bit more sense when oh gosh, what are their names? It's Hallie and Claudia.
Mhm.
Because Hallie was just very, very chill. Like she seemed to care less that her hair caught on fire. And so when they did have the fight, and Claudia's like, "You just seem like you don't even care about the wedding." I actually kind of believed it, because we had already seen that evidence that Hallie just was kind of like, "Oh, I'm here. I'm here." Like
Yeah.
we knew that she wasn't like huge into marriage in the past, and that she was just kind of like whatever. So, I was kind of I did kind of believe the argument a little bit, but
I also think
also
and like agreeing with you in that, I
yeah.
think that it also goes to show how well adapted, or like I mean it's not like one for one adapted from Much Ado, but in the play Claudio, um which is part of the reason that actually Beatrice like has this thing where she doesn't like Claudio in the play, because he's very controlling of Hero, to the point of
Mm,
like it like stemming from like occasionally like you think like there's abuse or whatever going on. So in at one part of the play, before like people are getting redeemed and stuff, you're kind of like, wait, are we even like supporting this match? Like what is going on here? But I
yeah.
kind of liked that they were like, well, we need to have Claudio and Hero in this in the movie anyway. So we have Hallie and Claudia, and I liked that they made it the juxtaposition of like Hallie being like this very like carefree, like laissez-faire type of person, and then Claudia was like the control freak, in terms of like it was like type A versus type B
Yeah.
personality. Um, but I thought they did a good job where like sprinkling it throughout, of showing those moments, even like when they're walking through the park, or when not the park, when they're on the hike, and Hallie's like worried about B, but Claudia's just worried about like where's where's Jonathan gonna sit now? And like
Yeah.
it's kind of played off in like a comedic nature, but kind of
Yeah.
gives you a little bit of insight into like where their brains are even going in the first place.
Yeah.
And then of course we
Yeah.
learn that the fight was fake, and it's just another puppeteering moment.
Yeah. I think it like the when I was watching it, I think I was literally telling my screen, like, why would you let them ruin your wedding? Like it just they shouldn't be affecting your relationship over the wedding details. Like that shouldn't be the reason why that you break up. I was like, what is this movie doing? Why would you do that? And then
Yeah.
obviously it was fake. Which I did put together, but I also was like, wait, why? Why would we do this? Why are we fighting about this? That we weren't fighting this whole time and now we are. And yeah, so so I they had me a little convinced and I
Which is good, because that
yeah,
is the entirety of Much Ado, is just eavesdropping and
yeah.
overhearing conversations that is it true or is it not.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, they do finally decide, like, even after this argument's like, okay, we gotta pull together, be okay through this wedding. And they, they get married and I think Margaret and Ben start dancing together. Is that what happens? And then that's when Margaret kisses
Yeah,
Ben.
and because she's like, I want to be with you. Like I want somebody serious, and
Yeah.
like I
Oh, yeah.
know.
Because she went to the cake shop with B, and B was just like, "Oh, yeah, no, we're in a that we're taken, but like not that taken." And
Yeah,
she's like, "So
because
you don't mind if I go after him?" And she was just like, "This is what he wanted." So she was like,
yeah,
That's what's gonna make him happy, so I'm
because
gonna
she
say
wanted
yes."
yeah, because she wanted to
Yeah.
say no, because she wants to be with him, but she has no idea that Ben wants to be with her. So
Hmm.
she's
Yeah.
like, I'm still gonna help him out. And she's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And then she catches them kissing and then
Yes.
leaves and goes people watching to the opera house. And then Ben is
Yeah.
like, wait, what? No, I pulled away. Like there's not.
Yeah.
And then and what's funny is that Pete and the dad try to do like the fake like eavesdropping conversation again,
Yeah.
while Ben is actually overhearing a real conversation that Claudia and Hallie aren't trying to have him overhear. And it
Yeah.
like gets him all fed up. And then that's when he learns that like she's left and she saw, and he's like, wait a second, no, like I need to go to her.
Yeah.
Um, though it was a little less I mean, it was great and it was fun, and I loved the like jumping off into the cliff, because you're like, what the fuck? And then the dad wanting to go
Oh
dive
my gosh.
after, and they like
I love
stop him.
that callback because he was like, okay, fingers
Nose
to
to
toes,
toe,
nose to
nose to
toes,
toe.
nose to toes. I was like, yes.
And they're like, no. But
No.
but I will say that I kind of have two thoughts to this, like
Okay.
kind of like arguing both sides. One, I appreciated like the continued recall to, oh, like what the dad always says, like nothing else matters when it comes to love, which I think is a line from the play, if not like an edited version of the line from the play. You know,
Yeah.
there's much to do with hate, but as much to do with love, um,
Yeah.
type of thing. But like, that's his train, right? Like again, the callback to like what B's dad and mom, like their relationship in the past. So like I get the understanding of like, oh, she's gone thinking that like he isn't like into her. He's like with Margaret. So he like goes to chase after her and like confess and blah blah blah. But I think for me, like when I think to the classic rom-coms, there's an urgency to
Mhm.
every chase,
Yeah.
right? So like in She's the Man, the urgency kind of lies in the fact that they're in the middle of a game, like the soccer game when it's happening. In 10 Things I Hate, not 10, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, it's like Andy's gonna be leaving, and so then there's like
Yeah.
the car thing, and I felt like I was like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more urgency in that final like chase
Yeah.
scene because it's the like, am I gonna am I gonna get to her in time? Is she gonna
Yeah.
be waiting at the top of the Empire State Building? I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, is she gonna meet me in the park?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Because it's like, well, you're all living in the same house. She's like, people watching at the opera house now, but she'll be back later.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, obviously that's way less romantic of him just like waiting for her to come back than like chasing after her. But
Yeah.
I also kind of wish that there was just like, I don't know, just like a tiny bit more urgency. I don't know.
No, like it would have been interesting if she had been like, okay, like Jonathan, like let's or like made it seem like she was going back with Jonathan or something, but maybe she was just dropping him off at the airport. Like something along those lines.
Yeah,
And for him to make the grand gesture, like, wait, don't leave with him. Like, I want you to be with me. And she's like, it
like
would make
the
it funny if like, she was just like,
yeah,
wait, but I wasn't. Like, so it would give that urgency without being like, why would she just go back to Jonathan?
exactly. But then Jonathan and
Margaret
Margaret
kiss.
end up together. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
great.
um, yeah, so yeah, as we see, he just jumps off that cliff and unrealistically, you know how much it would cost to take an emergency helicopter in any case whatsoever?
Well, actually, I was watching it with my roommate, I was talking about that
Yeah.
after the buoy scene, and I was like, how much do you think that helicopter ride costs? And then she was sitting there thinking, I was like, you know what, it's Australia. It probably doesn't cost anything. I was like, if it was the States, it would cost like thousands upon thousands of dollars. And she was
Yeah.
like, I mean, yeah, they charge you thousands of dollars for an ambulance. And I was like, that's true.
I don't, yeah, I'm curious. Because I don't know if it would be covered though, like under universal healthcare is the
I
question.
don't, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, totally random. But I guess when uh there's a I meant to say this when we were talking about Easy A just like really earlier, but I guess
Yeah.
I was scrolling through like TikTok too to see like what are things like, people caught that maybe like I missed or, because you just can't see everything and I didn't have time to watch the movie multiple
Yeah.
times. But I guess when Pete's picking them up from the airport, there's a guy holding a sign that says Olive Pendergast,
Oh my gosh.
which is the main character at Easy A, and I think
Yeah.
that's funny.
Oh my gosh, that's really funny. I should have paused and read some of the signs because I know they had like several times they had actual words on the walls and stuff, and I wanted to go back through and like see how often they did it because I only caught it I think like 2 or 3 times, and I was hoping they did it more, but I'm also wondering if I just didn't see them because I wasn't paying enough attention and needed to go back. Well, anyways, it sounds like in Australia, it's a no.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. It looks like in the UK, yes, but in Australia, no, which is interesting. But yeah, I can't imagine paying that bill, especially if it was for false rescue.
Mhm.
Like they could I don't think they could sue, but they could I don't know what they would do. Sorry, now I'm like thinking about like false ambulance calls and stuff like that. My
We're
brain
go
is just like
we're down a different well
yeah,
here.
okay. Well, anyways, like he does make that grand gesture and it didn't have that urgency like you said. And I don't know. I wish they had taken it a different route that seems more plausible. Like maybe he had a friend that had a helicopter or something, and or maybe he had made friends with no, maybe he made friends with the ambulance people before and made a call. Like something along those lines
Mm.
that just seemed a little bit less, I'm gonna throw myself off a dangerous cliff and then just like wait for this helicopter that's gonna cost me thousands upon thousands of dollars. I know.
I
I
mean, he
know
works
not
at
everyone.
Goldman, so
This is true. He could probably afford it.
he could probably afford it. I don't
Oh,
know. I know. I'm
I
trying to
know.
think of what would have made me happier. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I loved like the him like coming onto the dock and like running up to her and then again like commenting on the cardio thing
Yeah.
and then his big like confession of love. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to wonder what that would look
Yeah.
like because I mean they do it in front of the opera house because of the conversation that they have on the buoy, but then it's also almost like what like they could have done like the I mean, I guess it's cliche
Yeah.
and maybe that's why they didn't do it. But they could have done like after the wedding, maybe like B changes her flight to go home like just like a little
Mm.
bit early or something,
Yeah.
and then they do it that way. Or
Yeah.
he shows up
Well, you know
at
what?
her house with like grilled cheese stuff again, like
Yeah.
at the end of the movie as like
Yeah. Something like he ends up going home too and like sees her. I think it would have been what could have been interesting. Sorry, I'm like thinking about other scenes that they could have done now because they were very strong when it comes to callbacks. Like almost everything was a callback to the beginning
mm,
of the movie. So maybe if they had him, if they had the wedding across from the Sydney Opera House, he could have jumped into the water and swam after, like swam to the other
yeah.
side to going back to that like the hot girl fit and like
And then
come
like
out
Pete,
soaking wet.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then Pete would be like, "There's sharks in the harbor," and he's like, "I
Who
don't
care?
care,"
Yeah, something like that
which
would
is
be.
wild that there's sharks in the harbor. Anyway,
I mean, I mean, that's how Finding Nemo got there, you know?
I mean that's fair. Just
Yeah.
anytime I learn anything about Australia's wildlife, I'm like, do I want to visit?
No, I mean, I do want to visit.
So do I.
But the ocean part's a little bit scary. Yeah, like when I learned about box jellies,
The
yeah,
spiders, I can't with the spiders. I don't
I
know.
know.
But then also Australia has quokkas, so you win some, you lose some, I guess.
What's a quokka?
Oh my God, Google it right now. It's
How do you
literally the
spell it?
Quokka. It is the cutest animal in the world.
Oh, okay, I know what this is.
And they only
I think
exist in like a small area of like the
gosh,
western side of Australia.
I know what these things are. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. I always thought they were called. It's one of those things where you've always seen it and you haven't heard the name before. So I thought it was coca,
Oh, nope, quokka.
quokka.
And I have learned this
Oh
through the
my
fact that
gosh.
I have a good bit of
They like
Australian friends.
smile, and then one of them has like a little tongue sticking out. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right there, the cutest. And they only exist in Southwest Africa. Africa. Oh my
Australia?
God, Australia. I don't know why I said Africa. Southwest Australia, and they are like heavily protected
Oh my
because
gosh.
they're, I guess, like very
Yeah.
endangered. Their cheeks are just so cute.
It's just like almost all the photos, they're so
I
cute.
know they just like always look like they're smiling,
Yes.
and it
Oh
just
my gosh.
it makes me so
They
happy.
they look like little like possums mixed with wallabies.
Yes, which I also love wallabies, though I
They're
was
s-
once told by somebody that I know that lives in the eastern like in Queensland, like near Sydney,
Yeah.
that wallabies are like kind of similar to like deer in America.
Oh, they're just everywhere.
They're just everywhere, and I'm just like, but they're so cute, so it's fine.
Oh my gosh, they're
They
so
sent me
adorable.
videos of wallabies in their backyard, and I was like, look at the wallaby.
Gosh, I would have been like, we're gonna fence this in. They're gonna be our pets now. Uh, let's name them.
Like somebody just like bringing a deer in to be their pet. Like, could you imagine freaking Bambi?
I mean, people do. Yeah. Lots of people, I mean, they don't take, no, I've seen videos where people like let the deers come into their house and it's crazy.
One other thing I wanted to say about the structure of the movie, and I don't know if this is true because I didn't have time to like fully look up what each act and scene the quotes were in,
Yeah.
but I took the quotes that we would see on the walls
Mhm.
um as the indications of the acts in the play.
Oh,
So like
okay.
assume thy part in some disguise, which is what you see on like right before when they're getting on the boat because
Mhm.
the boat there's a masquerade or a ball or there's some big party that's in the middle of Much Ado About Nothing. And the boat scene, I think, took place for that. I think a skirmish of wit that we see on the wall when Jonathan arrives is an indication of Act Two. I'm pretty sure There's Much to Do with Hate, but More to Do with Love is from the prologue. I'm actually gonna look this up now.
Yeah, I think that one's at the very beginning, like right when she's leaving his apartment.
Yeah, that one's at the beginning. Yeah, Act One, Scene One. Here's Much to Do with Hate, but More with Love.
Yeah,
So I think that each of the quotes were signifying.
the different acts. That would make sense because, like I said, I only saw like I think three in total or
Wait,
two.
this that line is from Romeo and Juliet. It's not even from Much Ado About Nothing. I didn't know that. Here's
Oh,
Much to Do with Hate, but More with Love. Why then, oh brawling love, oh loving hate. This is from Act One, Scene One. Interesting. A skirmish of wit. I mean, the lines that the characters say are from Much Ado.
mm,
Act and scene. A skirmish of wit. A skirmish of wit is from Act One, Scene One of Much Ado About Nothing.
yeah.
Um, assume thy disguise in some part. Act scene is from Act One of Much Ado, but what scene? Assume. I will assume thy part in some disguise. That's what Pete. That's what Don Pedro says. Or Pete. Yay, Google. This is also okay. That's from scene one. Okay, so then never mind. My theory has already been
It's been
proven wrong.
disproven.
It's been disproven.
Ugh,
I do think that they are indications of the plot and where the story's going, but it's not
yeah,
the actual like act one, act two, act three, act four, act five that you get in a
yeah.
Shakespeare play. I'm also like, actually, Romeo and Juliet came out when? 1597. Much Ado was 1612.
Oh wow, that's a big gap.
Or it was written in 1598,
Oh,
1599. Okay, so Romeo and Juliet came first.
yeah.
Now I'm wondering if he inspired himself with that line, there's much to do with hate, but more to do with love to write Much Ado About Nothing. Or maybe not. I'm just like actually interested that the main quote, like at the very beginning of the
Wasn't
movie is
even from the actual play. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I wonder what other inspire because I heard that like it's not just based off of Much Ado, like it's mainly based off of it, but I heard that it was inspired by other Shakespeare as well as other rom-coms that base themselves off of Shakespeare. So I'm curious how much
Oh,
of like the other characters and scenes and stuff like that are based off of other Shakespeare plays.
that's interesting.
Yeah, because I know I'm like trying to draw parallels, but I have a very limited Shakespeare knowledge. I'm like, I
Shakespeare is
know.
the OG rom-com writer. Get out
Oh
of here,
yeah.
Emily Henry. Who needs Emily Henry when we have Shakespeare? Classic.
Uh
I mean, but like if you think to like Shakespeare adaptations, 10
yeah.
Things I Hate About You,
Yeah.
She's the Man, um, obviously now Anyone But You, Warm Bodies. There's like so many adaptations
Warm
of Romeo and
Bodies is
Juliet.
based off of it.
It's Romeo and Juliet.
I
The
mean,
Lion King
you
is
can say
Hamlet.
that about a lot of things though. Any star-crossed lovers, everyone's gonna
But no,
say,
but that's a West Side Story. That's Romeo and Juliet. Kiss Me
yeah,
Kate is The Taming of the Shrew. The
yeah,
Lion King
is Hamlet.
is Hamlet. Um, I don't know if there's any big. I wonder. I don't know if there's any big been. any big retellings of Midsummer Night's Dream.
I don't know. I know like Macbeth from Jimmy Neutron. I learned a lot of Macbeth from that. And then I saw it with Daniel Craig, which was interesting.
Okay, I googled it. Apparently, Get Over It, a 2001 movie starring Kirsten Dunst and Mila Kunis, is based on A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a teen romantic
Right.
comedy of a high school senior who tries to win back his ex-girlfriend by joining the cast of the school play she is starring in.
Oh,
Interesting. And then, of course, like literally any Kenneth Branagh movie, his adaptations of Shakespeare, and when he does it as like straight like Shakespearean, it's just so good.
yeah. So what was your overall rating of the film?
Honestly, so the first time I watched it, like I said, I watched it very late at night on Twitter, and I was like, okay, this is fun. And then the second time
Yes.
I watched it, is do I like this? I don't know. But after
Mm.
watching it a third time now, I'm kind of like, I think my overall rating in terms of like a rom-com, I think I would give it a 7 out of 10 or a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because even though there were certain things that I think like maybe could have been done a little bit better, the writing could have been a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
I think overall the cast was fantastic. I think
Hmm.
it had the comedic moments. I think it adapted its original source material really well. It
Yeah.
made me laugh. It made me like feel good. It had like really fun moments that I would that I would want to rewatch again, such as like
Yeah.
the spider scene or the end scene with Unwritten. I thought that it hit the moments of intimacy and being emotional
Mm.
just as strongly as it did the moments of comedy. And will it have as long lasting of an effect as the classic rom-coms we grew up with? I don't know. But
Yeah.
do I think that it was a really strong rom-com and I can understand why people are like, "Oh, we're back."
Yeah.
100%. Would I love to see Sydney and Glenn in another rom-com kind of a la, Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, or
Hmm.
Julia Roberts and Richard
Yeah.
Gere,
Gear.
Gere. Yes, I would, because
Yes.
I do think that they played well off of each other. I also feel like Sydney will do even better in her next one now that
Yes.
she's kind of gotten like one true rom-com under her belt. And like I can definitely see myself like picking this again in the future if I'm like, oh, I want like a fun little ditty to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I agree. I think for me, this movie is, like I said, it was so close to everything I wanted it to be. It was just slightly like there was just certain things that kind of missed the mark for me, but then some things really hit the mark. And
Mhm.
I think that this was a wonderful like gateway rom-com movie. Like let's bring them back. Let's see what we can come up with
Yeah.
and bring them back because there's going to be bad ones. There's going to be great ones. And I think that this has opened a door for people to want this again, and they have said it. They're like, yes, like let's bring these back. Like let like
We
uh
want the rom-com renaissance. Come on.
yes, we wanted to come back. Like I've been saying that like horror movies have kind of been on the rise, especially for people going to theaters. As of late, they have been missing the mark, but they have been bringing people in. And
Mhm.
I think that with rom-coms, I think that I think they're going to be able to do it, especially if they do bring back Glen Powell and Sydney Sweeney again. I think they're going to be very picky about what they decide to choose, because they have talked about uh, doing another project together, and that they're
Mhm.
looking at scripts, but they're going to look for the right one, and that's exciting. I think that that
That
means
is exciting.
yeah, like that just means that like whatever they do next is it's probably going to be really really great.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
like that they agreed that they don't want to do an Anyone But You sequel. They want to do like in the
okay,
style of Tom and Megan and
yes,
Richard and Julia, like just a completely different movie, just
yes,
starring the two of them again.
let's
I
and
would also love
sequels.
to see that with Glenn and Zoe from Set It Up because I feel
Yeah.
like Glenn though could have chemistry with a rock. Like I think he's such a strong rom-com lead, and I think he's like
Yeah.
so good in that genre, and he's a very personable human. Like when I watch
Yes.
interviews, things like that. Um, like like he's got great chemistry with Zoe Deutsch and Set It Up. He's got great chemistry
Mhm.
with Sydney Sweeney and Anyone But You. I don't know who the actress is in Hitman, but their chemistry was also like
Mhm.
off the charts. And
I
I'm just
feel like
like,
he's kind of in his like Matthew McConaughey era right
ah,
now. Yeah, like he's hitting
yes.
those rom-coms. Yeah.
And I love it because like bring back the rom-com lead. Like, do you know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
Like Mark Ruffalo, 13 going on 30, Matthew
Yeah, you
McConaughey,
saw my
failure
post
to
the other
launch.
day.
Oh yeah. Failure to launch. And I keep going to say 10 things I hate about you, but how to lose a guy in 10 days.
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger. Oh
Oh,
my God. We had early baby Joseph Gordon-Levitt before 500 Days of Summer. Uh,
yes.
so in 10 things I
Yeah.
hate about you. Um,
Yeah. Like,
Tatum, and she's the man.
oh,
I don't know who
imagine
first
Glen
chose.
Powell in like A Knight's Tale. Like doing that like
He
Heath Ledger type role. Like
Wait, he could do one. I fucking love A Knight's Tale.
it's
So
one of the best movies ever. Yeah.
if you ever want to have a pod
Yes, I have not
about,
watched that movie in so long. I would love to.
we should watch it. And honestly, we should have my sister Kat also join us
Yes.
because it's one of her favorite movies of literally all time.
Hmm.
And it is just so much could be said. I'd have a
Yeah.
great time talking about that movie. I would also have a great time talking about A Princess Bride.
Oh,
Another classic.
such a good movie. But like I want that if we're gonna bring back rom-coms, let's also bring back the medieval, like just
The medieval comedies that have like a modern soundtrack. Like I love those types of
yes.
things.
Yeah.
I also
I just
think,
want a knight. Like I want a man like the literal translation of a knight in shining armor coming to get the woman. And they don't necessarily have to rescue them, but to be that knight in shining armor there. I want that. I want that
yeah.
literal translation back. Like
I
let's
and
do
I
that.
and I think what and I mean, I don't know if studios or production companies or what like fully understand like what people want, but kind of like, well, just like now saying like bring back the rom-com, like if we think back to a
Mhm.
lot of like A-list movie stars that were in these rom-coms, like
Yeah.
freaking I was rewatching Failure to Launch the other day and Bradley Cooper
Yeah.
was in it and he wasn't the lead, but I was like, "Oh my God, Bradley Cooper." But
Yeah.
like you but there were all of these amazing like rom-coms of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s that helped launch the careers for so many A-list stars. And actually, I was listening to an interview or I was reading an interview with it, I want to say it was Austin Butler, but he was talking
Mm.
about how his time on Hannah Montana was like acting boot camp for him and he like will always like appreciate like when he did those like types of shows and things like that. And he isn't the first actor that I've heard say that. I feel like Zendaya might have said something similarly when talking about Shake It Up and stuff like that, but like those types of shows like having the 20 episode seasons and like having to learn your lines and do all this stuff like even like I know I've seen it from a consumer perspective where we're like stop giving us these limited 8 episode fucking seasons, like bring
Yeah.
back the 22 episode seasons, like so many
Yes.
storylines and plot lines like just aren't like getting like fully fleshed out and like aren't getting what they deserve. But then I've also heard
Mhm.
actors saying like they were so thankful to have that like back in the day because it was like an acting boot camp. I think
Yeah.
not Dove Cameron. Somebody was on as a kid on one of the daytime soap operas and they like said the same thing, but we don't get that
Yeah.
as much. And it's just like and
Well,
it's like so much of what's
yeah.
old is new again. And it's like, can we do that in like ways that matters? Like leave 2000s fashion in the past, but like
I know we're picking up the wrong trends here.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I agree. I think also like I mean, actors are human. And when they have like when it comes to TV shows and having those 22 episode seasons, those hour-long episodes, that was their life, their job, their family. That is the stability that they had. And now when you're doing 8 episodes, like you're constantly, I'm seeing like 5 different shows with the same actors in it because oh, we're just going to jump around through shows because they have to have work. And now we want all the relevant people instead of finding good actors because we're also
Yeah.
not sticking with the stuff that is good. Like one of my favorite shows just got canceled and I am
Which
heartbroken
one?
because Not Dead Yet. It has oh my gosh, Gina Rodriguez, I believe. And
Oh
then
wait, I think I know which one you're talking about. I haven't seen it, but I know which one you're
oh
talking
my gosh,
about.
the first season was amazing. Second season was a
Is that also
little
starring what's his face?
It has Gina Rodriguez and Hannah Simone from New Girl. Um,
Oh yes.
but this show, oh my gosh, it was the first season was amazing. And I like rewatched it recently and cried in every single episode. Uh, I mean I relate to it a lot because I'm like a single 30-something-year-old and living in New York trying to figure things out. And that's exactly what she's
Okay. Am I
doing.
gonna watch this when I hang up?
Yes. Second season's great. They missed the mark a little bit, but they brought it back in the season finale. And I was like, okay, they brought it back. They made up for it. Like let's get on with this third season. We need a third
Yeah.
season. We need the revival. Second season, like it needs to be revived. Because we know what like I've been on Reddit. All of us agree how we wanted the story to go, and we're like,
Mhm.
let's do this third season. And it got canceled. And it's
No.
like just hold on. Like not every show, like look at Family Guy. It has been on for way
Ever
too
in a day.
long. Yeah. But like it constantly got canceled and they kept bringing it back. Like they changed up like what day it
Oh
was
really?
falling on. It got canceled and then when it went to DVD, people were picking it up in the store and you know back in Blockbuster days and they did really well when it came to like DVD sales and to like
Well,
reruns and
that's like
everything like that.
Netflix is
And so they brought it
notorious
back.
for canceling the shows it should not fucking cancel.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Hulu too. Like that's not dead yet. It's a Hulu show. So it's just, or like, it streams on Hulu, I should say. I think it's ABC.
Okay.
But it's just they're not giving shows a chance and they're looking I honestly I don't even know what numbers they're looking at anymore because I yeah, like the industry's changed so much and you're not gonna they're not getting consumer satisfaction and that's not what they're focusing on. They're focusing on the numbers. They're like, we aren't hitting these streaming numbers, so let's change it up. But the more you do that, the more you're adding into this already saturated field. And if you just stick with this one thing, it's like anything you do. You got to put on, you know, training wheels. You got to build things up so you can take the training wheels off. You got to flesh out who these characters are, let people like grow and like not everyone's going to know everything right away either. Like you might only have an audience of 1,000 people and you have to wait for the next season or the
Build,
next
yeah.
season to build it up and they just want immediate success for
They do.
everything.
And it like and it stresses me out because
Yeah.
I'm like, we should not be consuming art in this way and we should not be making
No.
art in this way.
Yeah.
And it leads to really running people ragged and running people dry. And
Mhm.
then people turn to AI, but then it's like we should be using AI to do like data analysis and like do the dishes so we as humans
Mhm.
have more time to make art. But that's a whole different conversation. Uh that needs to be had. But yeah, I agree. I think the churning out, like almost in a weird way, like the strike prolonging the third season release of Bridgerton, I think
Yeah.
made me enjoy the third season release a little bit more. I
Yeah.
have my gripes about it being fucking split up into two parts, but I love Nicholas
Yeah.
Hoffman and I will do anything for her.
Yeah.
I love her. If you ever want to talk about Dairy Girls, I've
I
just
have
binged
not
it.
seen Dairy Girls.
You should. I've just binged it for the first time ever. Because it's been on my list to watch for a while, and
Yeah.
I finally got around to it. And it was way too short. It ended way too soon. I'm already like wanting to rewatch it. It's just so good, and Nicola is fantastic in it, and so is the whole cast. But the girl that plays Orla, I'm totally forgetting the actress's name, but the girl that plays Orla is my favorite character on Dairy Girls, but she stars as the lead in Disney's Renegade Nell, which is a
Mm.
show that I watched with my roommates and really, really enjoyed. I highly recommend. It takes place in England in, I don't know, King Henry times, King somebody times, and she
Okay.
has like magical powers that helps her like defend people. It's fun. It's
Okay.
good-hearted. It's darker than you would think for a Disney Plus show, but
Okay.
like a lot of fun. I really highly recommend. Really enjoyed if you want like a little bit of like fantasy, fantastical stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. One fun fact I have is that my sister's partner, I teasingly refer to him as my brother-in-law, even though they're not married yet. But his family, I learned growing up, was a Nielsen family.
I have always wanted to be a Nielsen family.
They were a Nielsen family, and I'm just like,
How
that is
did you ever ask how? Like, how was that possible?
I don't know, but I know his dad worked for the government, and it
Okay,
was like a connection through that. I don't remember.
interesting.
I could ask
So the
and then
Nielsen,
find
what we watch on TV is controlled by the government, is what you're saying?
maybe. I
No.
don't actually know. I could be making that up. I don't know if his
No,
dad
you're
working for the government had any relation to it.
good.
But they were a
Yeah.
Nielsen family, and I thought, and I was like, that is so interesting.
I know I would have, first of all, our family watched like anything and everything under the sun. So we should have been a Nielsen family.
Me and my dad, me and my mom's not a big TV watcher, but my dad definitely is.
Yeah.
And I still remember the first two shows I ever binge watched with my dad was, and I don't remember what order it was in, but I think it's in the order I'm gonna say, but it was Friday Night Lights and Prison Break because they
Okay.
were on Netflix or they were on Hulu, which were like, the first two ones that we had. And I remember that was like the first time with my dad specifically that it was like don't watch like I have rehearsal after school, don't start the next episode until I get home. Like we were
Yeah.
like in it, and then now like when I go home to visit family, me and my dad pick a new K-drama to watch because that's what we watch
Mm.
together now.
Oh,
Or
we watch, me and my dad like to watch a lot of TV together, and we pick like the worst, like Hallmark rip-off movies you can think of and watch those, and it is great and wonderful.
actually, the first one of the few like non K dramas that I watched with my dad recently, it was when I was home over Christmas, like New Year's. My Christmas is in January. But it was The Society of the Snow. And me and my dad
Oh,
were like we were like scrolling through Netflix trying to find something to watch. And we hovered, and you know how Netflix does that thing where when you're like hovering over a title,
starts
it
playing
plays.
it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was playing the trailer first, and I was like, "What's this?" And he was like, "I don't know. I think it's based off of the Andes crash." And I was like, "What was that?" Because I didn't learn about it in school or anything.
Yeah.
And he told me, and he was like, "Well, let's just like see what it is." It's a 2.5. It's a long ass movie, and it was like already late, but we were like, "Oh, let's just see what it is." And then next thing you know, we're both just sitting there like wrapped with attention and being like, "Oh my God," and and we were having discourse and we were watching, and it was just like I think at one point my mom came out and was like, "What is happening here?" And we were just like so into it.
Yeah.
And that's anyway, like not anything to do with anyone but you. I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
I'm
You're
such a
okay.
tangent.
We're like, no, I'm uh honestly still on the same. I'm on tangents as well. I was going to start another one, but I'm glad you stopped me.
ADHD, ADHD.
Ooh. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to everyone listening. If you liked what you heard, you can like and subscribe, follow. If you didn't, just don't downvote me. All right.
All you stream of consciousness people,
Yes, yes.
come and listen.
All right. Well, you guys have a great day. Bye.